Thanks, Jess. Morena, good morning, everyone. I feel a bit like a fraud because unlike Kirsten and Karina, I don't own a successful business. I haven't set up a successful business. I've set up a very unsuccessful business one time in the past, and I'll talk to you about that. And I'm not even a CEO, so I'm starting off as a bit of a fraud. So that's what I'm not, but I suppose I can tell you what I am. I do lead an organisation in New Zealand which has 150 staff across the country. We've got a total staff of 450 worldwide, and I look after the New Zealand part of that effectively global organisation. I'm not even young, and I don't have enterprise as my middle name. I'm probably born about 40 years before most of you, at least looking around the room, and probably 20 or 30 years before Kirsten and Karina. So what I do have though is a 35-year career. I've worked for 35 years, I think, about that time, and I can tell you a little bit of my story in the next few minutes. I also will tell you a little bit about our organisation because I'm hoping that some of you are interested not only in business and setting up these amazing businesses that you do through the Young Enterprise Scheme, but also in becoming chartered accountants and joining us in our profession. Our association with Young Enterprise Scheme goes back quite a long time. We've supported the Young Enterprise Scheme for the last 10 years, so I think we're probably the second longest supporter of the Young Enterprise Scheme. I was very lucky last year to be on the national judging panel for the finals, so that was an amazing experience. So some of you I think may have been already, I don't know whether you're all new CEOs or some of you have been involved in the Young Enterprise Scheme last year or the year before as well. But the national finals, if you get there, it's an awesome day, and there's an incredible stories of success that you and all your colleagues will be telling, and it's really hard if you're a judge, but it's really rewarding because I just was blown away. It was the best day I had at work last year, and I have a lot of days at work obviously, so it was really good that it was at the Young Enterprise Scheme on the 6th of December, so I think it's about the same time this year. So it's a really awesome scheme you're involved in, and good luck with all of your enterprises. So as I said, I'm not a CEO, and I don't even own a business, so I can't answer all those questions about competitors and pricing and all the rest of it. But I have had, as I said, this ability to reflect over the last 35 years of working. Like probably what will happen to most of you, so you're all millennials, and what we hear about millennials is a whole lot of good stuff, but we also hear that you won't have linear careers. So you won't leave school and go into a career and stay there forever. In fact, you won't stay there for very long, most of you. So the statistics suggest that over your lifetimes you'll end up doing, say, 17 different jobs in 5 different industries, and you'll move between working and studying again, and studying later in life, and then retiring, and then moving back into work and studying again. So you won't have a linear career like most people my age did have. But I didn't really have a linear career, and it's probably the wrong thing to say, but I wasn't strategic. I haven't ever been strategic about my career. I've just responded to opportunity. So opportunities come your way often, and I like to seize those opportunities when they come my way. So just in terms of how I started off, so about 40 years ago, before any of you were even thought about, I left school, and I loved school, and I wanted to go to university. I didn't really know why I wanted to go to university other than that I loved learning and I loved new stuff, and I wanted to go to university, and all my mates were going to university, so I thought, right, I'm going to university. Then the next question is, what am I going to do there? I was a bit of a geek, and I loved languages, so I started studying German and Spanish at Auckland University, and then I started law. So I don't know whether any of you are thinking about doing law, but if you do, you've got to persevere, because law starts off really dry and really boring. So it's really heavy going in the first year or two, and I nearly gave up. I decided, look, this is not me. It's too dry. It's too boring. Doesn't involve enough people stuff. So I'm going to try and learn a skill that will be useful in the world. So I thought, right, some of my mates are doing commerce. They're studying accounting. That sounds like a really good skill to have. So I left, or I sort of thought I'll step aside from law and and start commerce. But luckily one of the lecturers in law said, "Oh, stick with it, you know, keep doing law at the same time as you do accounting." So I started off doing accounting. And what was really scary for me was when I'm so old that when I started doing accounting, we had to do a computer studies paper. And computer studies was something that only the real geeks at school did in my year and my age group. So they went into a little room with punch card machines. You've probably never seen one of those, but they were these great big machines and they had little cards with holes in them, and people programmed these little cards and put them in the machine. So when I was starting to do commerce at university, I had to go and learn how to program, which was bizarre when you think about it. It was really stupid because none of us were ever going to be programmers. People who were programmers had different skill sets. They were coders, they were brilliant at what they did. We were commerce students, we didn't need to learn how to program a computer. And I just scraped through, I think, with a C- in that paper. It was the worst paper I ever did at university. But I managed to get through commerce and law and a BA in German and Spanish, so I kind of ended up this sort of geek person who graduated with 3 degrees in 1 year, which was a little bit unusual. People said to me, why did you do this? And I said it was accidental. I responded to opportunity, but I don't have any regrets. I love all of these things. So then I left university and I went to work. And in those days, this was also scary. If you started in a law firm, you got paid $7,000 a year. Now, that's not a lot of money. If you started in a chartered accounting firm, I was offered $16,000 a year. So there was no question for me. I was going into a chartered accounting firm. I loved tax, so I went to work in tax in a CA firm. So I ended up 2 years in Auckland working in a CA firm doing tax. And you think, God, that sounds boring. It wasn't. It was really exciting. Some of you might have heard of Winston Peters and the Wine Box. So this was 1980s. This was absolutely, the whole of New Zealand was doing tax planning because the tax rate was 66%, so no one wanted to pay tax. So New Zealanders invested in all sorts of things to generate tax losses to reduce their incomes. So that's why we have a goat industry, that's why we have a deer industry, that's why we have a kiwi fruit industry, because all these people, they talked about Queen Street doctors, lawyers, accountants, all over the country invested in all these schemes so that they could make losses for tax purposes and do well out of that. And so New Zealanders funded all the shows in London. So when Phantom of the Opera was launched, when Les Mis was launched, when all of those Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals were launched in London, they were paid for by New Zealand doctors, lawyers, dentists and farmers who wanted tax losses, because those shows generated big losses for years before they started to make profits, and you could put them off against your tax in New Zealand. So it was a really big, busy time in tax in New Zealand, and I was very lucky. I worked for a guy called Rob McLeod, who's just been knighted in January, Sir Rob McLeod. So he's a Māori guy who's incredible. He is an economist, he's an accountant. He was head of EY where we are today, head of EY for Oceania, so for Australia and New Zealand for a long time. He's now does a whole lot of senior directorships, governance roles, and was an awe-inspiring guy to work for. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I kind of started to think, oh, morally, ethically, I'm not sure whether this is what I want to do, help rich people pay less tax. So I ended up going overseas, and I did what lots of Kiwis do. I went overseas. I thought I could be away for 6 months. I could be away for a year. I ended up being away for 9 years. So I left New Zealand with a backpack and came back effectively 9 years later. And what did I do when I was overseas? I did bugger all for a while. I worked as what's called a paralegal, so I did legal jobs, and I wasn't a qualified solicitor in the UK where I worked. I was a lawyer in New Zealand, but not in the UK, so I had to do some fairly crappy jobs in the UK as a lawyer. I worked in a ski resort for 6 months. I went to East Germany. You're all way too young to know what East Germany was, but it was behind the Iron Curtain. So it was East Germany, it was communist, and I went there to learn German, to improve my German. And that was an incredible experience. Just before the Berlin Wall came down, I spent 6 or 8 weeks behind the Iron Curtain, and that was the most engaging experience of my life, probably. It was incredible. And then I did all sorts of other stuff, and then Britain was going to deport me because I'd overstayed my visa, so I had to get out of Britain. You only had I used to go early in the morning and queue outside the Home Office in Britain, the immigration department, because they were going to deport me. So I had to go and report and say, look, can you give me another month? Can you give me another couple of months? I really want to live here. I love it. New Zealand's a little bit quiet. I don't want to go home yet. Eventually they said, no, your number's up, you've got to go. So I thought, right, where can I go? I don't want to go back to New Zealand yet. So I decided to go to Germany. And Germany, the reason I chose Germany was that Germany offered postgraduate studies for free. So you could go and do a master's degree in Germany for free. The Germans paid for it. So I ended up in Germany for a couple of years doing a master's in law, which was, I hadn't really thought about it enough because my German was pretty good. But I had to write my dissertation, my thesis in German. I had to go to all my classes in German. I had to do oral exams in German. And it was really, really hard. And I ended up doing really simple papers because I had to, the language was a challenge. But I loved it. I absolutely love and still love Germany. And I've spent 6 or 7 years of my life there. And then when I was in Germany, I saw this opportunity to work in Spain. And I thought, right, New Zealand's doing a big exhibition in Spain, taking part in a World Expo in Spain, so that's me. I need to go there, I need to work. So I had to go to London and have an interview, and they said to me, well, how's your Spanish? And I said, oh, it's pretty rusty, it's not very good, but I'm fluent in German. And they said, oh, we want one German speaker. We're recruiting 120 young New Zealanders to work there, but we need one German speaker. So you're it. So I was effectively the person who was supposed to speak to all the German tourists at the expo in Spain. The German tourists didn't come to the expo in Spain because it was way too, how shall I say, it's environmentally unfriendly, and it wasn't sound what the Spanish were doing there and the rest of it. So I had to then quickly improve my Spanish and had to talk Spanish to visitors all day, which was a big challenge, but lots of fun. And then another opportunity arose where I loved working there, and then I saw that there was going to be a New Zealand exposition in Korea. And I'd never been to Korea, I didn't know anything about Korea. I don't know if we've got any Korean people in the room. Cool. So I went to Korea, to a city called Daejeon, which is south of Seoul, for 6 months. And I worked there effectively like an Olympics. It was, are you from Daejeon? No? Daejeon? Seoul. I loved Seoul. I used to escape to Seoul whenever I could, but it was basically a 24/7 job. So my job was to manage 50 young New Zealanders and Koreans. 25 young New Zealanders, 25 young Koreans for 6 months, working in an operation that was open 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And boy, did I learn a lot there. So I learned a lot about people by managing these 50 young people. When I say young, they were about 10 years, I was about 30, they were probably about 20. I made a big mistake, or actually it wasn't a big mistake, it was the right thing to do. So this is a lesson for all of you, do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. So I had to choose a couple of these young people to lead the others, to be the leaders. And so I said to them all, look, I'm going to observe you for a couple of days and then I'm going to appoint a couple of you as leaders. And I appointed 2 young Korean women as leaders. No men, 2 young Korean women. And I then had almost a riot on my hands from the men in the room, because they said this is inappropriate, women can't be the bosses. This is a long time ago, this is 25 years ago, and I said, I'm sorry, but this is a little bit of New Zealand here, and we're playing here by New Zealand rules. These 2 young women are the best leaders in this group, and they are going to lead us for the next 6 months. Everyone had to suck it up, and it was a useful lesson to me to stick by my guns, to do what I believed was the right thing to do. So I did that, which was challenging. And I had an amazing time there. I spent one whole night at the police station when one of our young New Zealanders had got in a fight. I spent another whole night at the hospital when a young New Zealand woman had got knocked off a scooter. We had a big flood on just the day before the Expo Pavilion opened, so we were next to the Vatican Pavilion. The Vatican Pavilion had a fountain in there, appropriately for the Catholic Church, a fountain in their pavilion, and that all went wrong. 2 days before that we'd had tens of thousands of dollars worth of New Zealand carpet installed in our pavilion, and it was destroyed by the overflowing fountain overnight. So we got through all that kind of stuff. We had a ball. One of my jobs, we had a kapa haka group, a young Māori performing group who were absolutely brilliant. They became the hit of the show. So we had 1 million visitors over the period that we were open, that expo, and there were girls coming every day, young Korean women coming every day and screaming at the Māori guys doing the haka. And they got this huge, I had no fans, but they had this huge fan group. And one of my tasks, though, with taking this young Māori group I was told that I had to look after them. And I had to make sure that they were safe and well. Well, one of my charges became pregnant during the expo, and I had to send her home, with profuse apologies that I hadn't fulfilled my duties of looking after the group. But it was an absolutely incredible experience, and I learnt a lot from it. And then that gave rise to another opportunity. I then went to work for the New Zealand Trade Development Board, which is, some of you may have heard of NZTE, which is New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. That is now what was the Trade Development Board. And I worked for them in Wellington for 2 years, and they said to me on day one, "You're going to look after electronics and telecommunications exporters." And I said, I don't know anything about electronics and telecommunications, it's not my natural fit. And they said, "You'll be fine." So I spent 2 years working with incredibly successful New Zealand exporters of telecoms and electronics and software. So Wellington and Christchurch particularly have got really strong industries in that area. And then they offered me the gig of being the New Zealand Trade Commissioner in Germany, so I spent 3.5 years in Germany as the New Zealand Trade Commissioner. And that was again a really exciting opportunity. I led a team of about 10 mostly German staff who were opening the market in Germany for New Zealand exporters. So New Zealand exporters are very successful in places like Germany with things like meat and wine and kiwi fruit. But we had to look after all the smaller companies. So we had exporters of hats, exporters of sex toys, believe it or not, from New Zealand to Germany. Very successful little story there. And exporters of all sorts of things, software, electronics. We also did a huge promotion of New Zealand tourism, New Zealand seafood, New Zealand food. And I had a ball there for 3.5 years looking after New Zealand exporters who were trying to enter the German market. The biggest challenge for me there was that New Zealand exporters, when they came to Germany, they came on all these trade missions or came to see their distributors, and what they always wanted to do was go out drinking beer and eating Schweinehaxen, so big pork knuckles, and I'd have to say to them, "Look, you're in the north of Germany or the west of Germany, and this is very Bavarian, south of Germany. The South Germans drink lots of beer at Oktoberfest, and they eat, sides of meat for dinner. But in the north and in the west, we don't do that. They eat salads and pasta and fish." They said, no, there must be a big beer hall here. So in every city we were in, all over Germany, we'd have to find the beer hall for the Kiwis. So we did that successfully. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And then my world fell apart. I think Kirsten referred to her world falling apart with her China contract. So we had a new CEO for the Trade Development Board and a new strategy. And Europe was old hat. Europe wasn't important. It was all about Asia. So half of the European staff were made redundant. So me and most of my German team were made redundant. I was sent home early. After 3.5 years, I should have been there 4 years. Germany's not important. Ironically, within 3 to 5 years, the German team had grown and Germany was again perceived as a really important market for New Zealand, which it is. It's a very strong, wealthy market. So I came home to New Zealand after 9 years away, and I thought, what am I going to do? And I thought, I need a job. I can't be unemployed, I need a job. And I thought, tax, that's what I started off doing originally about 12 years ago. I'll go into that. So I rang up some people and I said, from Germany, and I said, "I'm coming home, I need a job." And a couple of them said, "Oh yes, when can you start?" And I said, no, we need to have an interview. You need to interview me. I haven't been in New Zealand mostly for 11 years, I think it was. And I haven't worked for you for 12 years, so perhaps you could interview me. No, just come, when can you start? Can you start on February the 1st? I said, "No, I'm coming back." So I ended up going to work for PwC. So like EY, where you are today, PwC is a very big firm. It's one of what's called the Big Four, the 4 big firms globally. So in New Zealand, PwC is the biggest, so I went to work there and I had a fantastic 12 years at PwC. These big firms, these big chartered accounting firms, don't just do accounting, they do all sorts of stuff. They do consulting in every area imaginable. They do forensics, they do fraud, they do hospital management, they do absolutely everything you can think of they do, and they are wonderful places to work. So if some of you are thinking about your careers in several years' time, then do think about commerce and these big CA firms and smaller CA firms, which are wonderful opportunities. So I worked there for 12 years, loved it, just along the road here in that big tower on the waterfront. And then I thought, my God, I'm getting old. I need to step out of this comfort zone, and I need to do something that I can spend the next 15 years doing. So I decided to go to the university, and I got a job as an associate professor at Auckland University. And I had taught at the university on the master's program for many, many years, and I still do. I only spent 2 years at the university. It was a little bit of a shock going to the university from a big consulting firm like PwC. At the university, it's all about academic freedom and about working on your own, and doing research and teaching. And so I was then headhunted by Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand to go and work for them as the New Zealand tax leader and then as the New Zealand country head. And it's a job I love. I'm really lucky that most days are good. You do have your odd bad day. I mean, I don't have enough sleep. I had to get up at 5:30 this morning. I didn't have any of Kirsten's sleep drops because I had to do an interview on Mike Hosking's ZB. Thank goodness you're all way too young to listen to ZB, but I had to do an interview with Mike Hosking at 6:30, and I thought I better get up at 5:30 because then I'll be awake when he interviews me, because 6:30 is pretty early to be talking lucidly on the radio with a shock jock like him. So I don't get enough sleep, but I love my job. I have some amazing colleagues. So Mia, my colleague, is here in the room. So if any of you have got questions about our organisation, do ask Mia or me in the break at morning tea. And I'll just take 2 minutes to just quickly say about the business I did set up, which was a failure. So years ago, 2 friends and I decided that we wanted to import giftware into New Zealand. So we had this great idea. We'd been in Germany for years. We thought, there's all this stuff in Europe that New Zealanders need. There's all this beautiful giftware. So we went to a few trade fairs and we ended up importing 2 ranges of products, neither of which were successful. So one was a stainless steel range from Sweden. It was fantastic. It was beautifully designed. It was really expensive. New Zealanders thought it was too expensive. We went to our first trade fair and a guy in our hall who was a designer copied the products. We hadn't thought about that. He kept coming to our stand and looking at our products and said he loved them, and then he copied them and he got them made in China and he sold them cheaper than us, so that line was dead. So beware of the competitors, and don't be too nice to people. And then the other range was our really big mistake. So this was a range of candles from Israel, and they were very, very beautiful candles, but they never burnt down. So they were an external candle with a tea light in the middle. So if you're going to do something with candles, make sure you use candles that burn. Candles are a perfect product because they burn and people need to replace them. But if you sell expensive candles that never burn, then people have them for their lifetime. They're made with essential oils, so they retailed for $50. This is 10 or 15 years ago. People would buy 1 or 2 and love them. They'd have them for the rest of their lives. They'd die with them. So then we decided, okay, we'll extend the range. We brought in 2 containers worth of cheap candles from China, which were at the other end of the market. They sort of retailed for $2. The other ones retailed for $50. And there was way too much competition. We hadn't done the research. It was masses of hard work, this little company we set up. We made no money out of it in 4 years, but we had a ball, my 2 friends and I. I was up at 4 in the morning. The candles also ship coming from Israel. They moved in transit, and there were some eucalyptus oil candles with tens of thousands of them. They all shipped overnight, coming to New Zealand in the heat and everything, that they moved, and the wax or the oil ended up being on a slant, so they weren't fit for purpose, and we couldn't afford to send them back to Israel. So we had to cook them overnight in our ovens, tens of thousands of them, for about a year. Every night I was up at 4 in the morning, not every night, but some nights, doing my day job and up at 4 in the morning cooking candles. So just be very careful about product range. So that's all I could say.
Gosh, yeah, you have Peter has such a breath.
Very good question. So will an accounting job be changed or removed? That's a really good question. I get it all the time. So I'm the cheerleader for the accounting profession in New Zealand. So what I say to people, they often come and they ask me to talk about the future of the profession, of the accounting profession, and they say that automation, robotics, data analytics will destroy this profession. You will have nothing to do. And I say that's absolute rubbish. What we talk about is the profession of the future. So accountants are the the world's best experts at measuring things and about analysis. And they'll be doing all this added value analysis and measurement. It might be that they're measuring climate change effects or risk effects or developing strategy. They won't be doing compliance work, which is manually doing tax returns or preparing financial statements, but they have a very positive big future. So it's all about analytics and analysis and value add. So it's a different future, but it's the guy that said on TV last year that there'll only be 19 accountants in 2030 was talking a load of rubbish. Okay, we're growing. We've got more people. We've had the biggest numbers entering our CA program ever this year, and our pipeline from the universities is very strong. It was really hard. So tax law had changed massively in 12 years, and I went into PwC as a senior manager, and I was thrown into doing like a tax audit of a publicly listed company. So I learned very quickly. It was very hard. It was a bit like going to study, do a master's degree in German. You know, didn't really think through that, but took the opportunity. Opportunities are always good, but it was tough, yeah. And that's the good thing about tax. Tax, it changes all the time. It's about politics, it's about economics, it's about accounting, it's about law, it's about philosophy, and it's about sociology. So you're never going to be bored if you do a career in tax. Believe me.
What was your biggest learning in going overseas?
My biggest learning was that there's so much out there to learn that it's incredible that there are I think the biggest thing I learned after 9 or 10 years overseas was how good New Zealand is, how lucky we have it in New Zealand. New Zealand is a wonderful place to live and work. And to me that comes down to basics like it's very easy to do most things in New Zealand. When you live in a much bigger economy, a much bigger society, it's much tougher to do stuff. So I think that I learned, when I'd only been away 3 or 4 years, the last thing I wanted to do was come back to New Zealand. I thought it was a tiny little island at the bottom of the world that was boring, but I've certainly changed my mind after another few years overseas. So I'm the only thing between you and morning tea, so that's probably why there's no further questions. Anyone else? No? Cool. Well, hopefully that's been helpful, and enjoy the rest of the day.